And welcome back to Break It to Make It, where we meet people who challenge the things that we think that we already know about ourselves and others, where we meet people who've thrown out the rule book, maybe failed forwards, or taken the road less traveled to come out on top. Today, we want to talk about stress eating. Now, we've heard of it, but let's look at it from a slightly different angle. What if we could eat our way to stress resilience, as well as improved health, mental health, overall well-being, and mood? Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, we're going to find out how today. We are joined by a very special guest. I'm very excited for this. Our guest today is a former psychologist turned nutritional neuroscientist, an author, and she has dedicated her life to examining the science behind how lifestyle factors and nutrition impact on brain function. So welcome to the show, Dr. Delia McCabe.
Thank you so much, Fallon. I'm delighted to be here. Really, really delighted. I can't wait for our chat.
Thank you so much for carving out this time. I know you have some big, exciting changes coming up in your life, so I was glad to be able to grab this little moment with you this morning before you're off on some of your adventures. We had the opportunity to speak a little bit before, and I want to take us back to that wow moment. Many scientists have this wow moment where their investigative senses are lit up like their spider senses. And when was yours, when you saw something and thought, there's more to this, there's something going on, and I have to find out what it is?
This is a great way to start this conversation, because it really was that aha epiphany moment for me. And it happened 25 years ago, so I am aging myself. But I was busy looking at the psychological variables that underpin academic underachievement. And I was working with a group of school kids who really should have been excelling. These are the kinds of children that parents and teachers just throw up their hands about and say, look, these children are really smart, but they're doing really poorly. And I had a little bit of space on one of the questionnaires that I developed for these children. And I just threw a question in, and it was really kind of weird because it wasn't related to my research at all. But I simply asked them, what is your favorite food? And every single one of the children in my experimental group, that's the children who should have been doing well but were doing poorly, answered that they loved junk food. And all the children in my control group, that's the kids who were doing well, didn't love junk food. They loved Sunday roast and maybe roast potatoes and so on. And for me, I still remember sitting back in my chair after I'd worked my way through all of these questionnaires and thinking to myself, it's very seldom that one sees such a clear distinction between two groups. And I thought, I need to investigate this. I really need to find out if there's anything to this. Does the way we eat and what we eat impact how our brain functions? And can it really affect focus, concentration, mood, and even intellectual capacity? So once again, fate intervened. I was just about to have my first child, and I thought I'll take a bit of a break. So I handed in my thesis, I got my master's, and I started searching for researchers around the world who were investigating this topic. And it was really a challenge because I would find a sentence in a book, maybe a paragraph in a research paper, and I really had to track down this information. But for me, what was really startling was many of my colleagues and my peers were saying to me, why are you checking this out? Don't you want to be a therapist? Don't you want to help people better by talking to them and getting them to look at their lives differently? And I said, but what if there's more to this? And I really and honestly took the road less traveled, Fallon.
That's an amazing story. And I'm so glad that you did. And I'm excited that we get to learn from you today, because over 25 years, you've discovered some amazing things. And for those of us who don't have a background in neuroscience, let's try and start somewhere that's kind of around those building blocks. I wanted to ask a question because I don't know it. What is a neuron, and how do they connect? And tell me about how your work focuses on them.
Well, I always say to people, let's start at first principles. And so it's a great question. What is a neuron? A neuron is a very, very specialized cell. It's very sophisticated. It's very complex in how it functions, and our brain is full of them. But we have them in other parts of our body, including our brain. including our gut. So this is where we'll get to this discussion a little bit later about gut and brain interaction. But let's focus on the brain for a moment. We've got about 83 billion of these very, very specialized cells, these neurons, but they're very, very tiny. So we could fit about 20,000 of them on the head of a pin. So they're really minute, but the way they function depends to a very, very large degree on our lifestyle choices, specifically eating a specific kind of fat. Now, when I give in-person presentations, I have a whiteboard and I draw a cell membrane. I draw the membrane of the cell and of the neuron, and I explain very clearly how fat actually impacts the membrane. But we can use our imagination here really clearly and cleverly, because if you imagine a cell membrane, it's a little envelope around all the things that need to be making a cell function. And that membrane needs to be very flexible and malleable. It needs to be able to respond to the environment that it finds itself in. Now, of course, in the body, that's critical, but in the brain, it's even more critical, because what's going on in the brain in this very small space, but a huge place in effect, is that all of these neurons need to respond to each other really quickly to be able to pick up what's going on in the environment, to pick up what we're reading, what we're seeing, what we're thinking about, how our bodies are responding. So if that cell membrane isn't made up of the right fat, those cell membranes do not move with flexibility and malleability, and they don't connect to each other optimally, which means that anything that goes on in the brain is kind of like stagnant and slow, the opposite of what we want. So this connection between neurons is critical, and it relies on fat, as I mentioned. So just another fact, which a lot of people don't know, is that 60% of the dry weight of the brain is made up of fat. So that is, if we took out all the water, what would be left? 60% of that would be fat. Now, that's really important to know, because of that fat, 20 to 25% needs to be of a very specific kind that has a very specific molecular makeup, which allows that membrane to be very flexible and malleable so that it works optimally. But 95% of people today are deficient in those kinds of fats because they're not produced in the quantity that they should be produced. And most people with the diet they're eating are not getting those fats. So in a sense, most people are deficient in those fats, which means they're deficient in optimal brain function. So these fats are critically important, and we call them omega-3 and omega-6 fats. But the conversation about fats and oils is really complex, so we can just keep it top level for the moment, but they're critically important for that connection.
That's amazing. And so we've talked about the moving and shaking. And so is that how the neurons get their energy, through that fat process, or how does that work?
The fat actually helps the neuron produce energy efficiently, but that's a little bit technical. Let's just talk about how the components of the cell, the mitochondria in all our cells, including our neurons, actually produce energy. And we produce energy from the carbohydrates we eat. In fact, upwards of 20 to 25%, even upwards of 50% when we're really stressed, those carbohydrates are used to fuel the brain. So think about that, 2% body weight, and it can use upwards of 50% of the carbohydrates that we consume. So it's the greediest organ we own. So think about it this way. We eat these carbs, our mitochondria turn them into what we call ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. That energy is then used to fuel the neurons and all our cells. It keeps those neurons functioning, keeps them connecting well. If they've got the right fats, they do that optimally, and keeps the brain functioning, because it is the greediest organ. It needs to be connecting all the time. And a lot of that connection has to do with just purely day-to-day activities that we don't even think about, just bodily functions that the brain needs to be in charge of. On top of that, we need that energy for focus, for concentration, for learning, for memory, and to keep our mood stable. And this is something else important, Fallon. The brain has nowhere to store energy. On our body, we store energy on the fat that we carry around, if we do. But in the brain, there's nowhere to store energy. So we need to be supplying a stable and consistent source of energy to the brain to keep it functioning optimally. because it works 24/7. It never takes a break. Even when we're sleeping, it's busy functioning. So that blood glucose needs to be stable. And the primary way to do that is to make sure that the foods that we eat, the carbs that we eat, are nutrient dense and fiber filled. When they're the opposite of that, the blood glucose goes up and down, and the brain does not get a stable supply of energy. So the energy question is just as important as the connection question. These two need to work together optimally to allow the brain to function optimally.
That's amazing. And, as you're mentioning these words, carbohydrates, fat, and, consistent, stable, I think about all the different types of diets that get marketed to me as a woman, or just me as a human. We've got keto, there's intermittent fasting, there's slow carb, there's paleo. If we go way back, there's Atkins, all of this type of stuff. And it's got me thinking, what are the fads that are a bust or that are hurting us in a way that we might not be cognizant of? Like, a lot of people focus on food for fuel just for their body, and they might not be thinking about their brain. What do you have to say about some of these things in your experience?
This is a huge and complex conversation, because I always say to people, follow the money. If someone is trying to sell you a product that they say is the product that's going to do the wonders for you that it's promising, and if they've got a whole lot of books and a whole lot of recipes and they've got this huge platform and they keep on telling you that this is the way to eat, follow the money and look for the research. So I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, the only diet or dietary approach, I prefer that word, that research supports in relation to brain health and overall health is the Mediterranean diet. All the other diets are either having a focus on one item too much and neglecting another item. So for example, let's just take the keto diet. The focus is very much on fat, okay? Limiting carbohydrates. And, people say, oh, well, I love eating bacon. I love eating butter. Who doesn't want to eat these kinds of foods all the time? The challenge is that they're not focusing on the right kind of fat, because those fats actually come from the saturated fat family, not from the essential fat family, which is the 20 to 25% we've spoken about. So they're getting a lot of saturated fat, but not enough of the essential fats. And that means brain's not getting what it needs. So these diets often work for short periods of time because they cut out something that may be a challenge for people. So some people are eating too many carbs, but this is refined carbs, processed carbs. People need to remember that even cauliflower and broccoli and pumpkin, those are carbs as well, but they're nutrient dense carbs. They're not starches. They're not quickly turned into glucose in the body. So they have a stable effect on our blood glucose. So that's a different kind of carb. And even the paleo diet, I've actually written an article where I compare all of these diets, and it's on my blog. And I did that for this exact question, Fallon, because so many people are confused. The paleo diet supposes that at one point in our history, we had a perfect diet and everyone was perfectly healthy. And that is such a gross oversimplification of how we've evolved to where we are and what we now know about our diet. We've never known as much as we know now about how to keep ourselves really, really healthy, and also about what keeps the brain healthy. So the other diets really are limiting, but really a lot of people gravitate to them because they're saying, well, eat these things that are supposedly bad. It's not about that. When you look at the Mediterranean diet, you see there's a wide variety of food. It's nutrient dense, it's fiber filled, it's very colorful. So it's got antioxidants in it, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, keeping our neurons healthy. It's got a whole lot of good fats in it. It's got good protein in it. It's got great carbs in those nutrient dense, fiber filled, colorful foods. So it covers this broad foundation of all the variety of macro and micronutrients that we need. Whereas the other diets limit certain groups of food, and that doesn't leave us healthy ultimately. The long-term observational studies on all of those diets haven't come out yet. And I'd like to see them 20, 30 years down the line. Big questions around all of those.
That is such great advice. And as you're talking and as I'm learning from you, we have a saying in our house, and like many things, you wonder, where did it originate from? It's come from my husband. And we try to eat salmon at least once a week in the house. And every time we serve it, everybody sits around the table and says, we're going to have salmon to keep your brain slippery. And so I just think that that's, my husband always says it. And now it's really starting to make a little bit more sense to me with what we're learning from you today. And you did tease the next part of this, which is how do we keep those neurons healthy? And so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. This is the best part of the discussion because all the foods that keep the brain healthy are also really tasty. So let's just step back for a moment. We understand that the brain is the busiest organ we own. It's constantly using energy. It's constantly allowing connections between neurons. And all of that activity, unfortunately, comes with a side effect. Like, there's no free lunch. So all that activity and energy production comes with something called free radical production. Now, free radicals are kind of like cranky people. When you run into them, they make you cranky as well. And free radicals are really simple to understand. They are unstable molecules that are looking for stability, and they then go to a healthy neuron to steal an electron to make them stable again. And in that process, you can just imagine how this happens and what an enormous cascade of damage this can cause, because with all of that energy production, all of that activity, loads of free radicals are produced. And if all of them are going to neurons to look for an electron, eventually all the neurons will be damaged and compromised. So antioxidants step in, and antioxidants basically say to the free radicals, hey guys, we're going to donate an electron to you so that you don't have to go and cause damage to a healthy neuron. And these are wonderful compounds. We find them in fresh food that is very colorful. So that's one of the reasons that berries are so useful. We find them in things like carrots and things like pumpkin, and we find them in broccoli. Any colorful produce is full of these antioxidants that donate to these free radicals to stop their cascade of damage. And in the process, fortunately, antioxidant foods are also filled with compounds called anti-inflammatories. And anti-inflammatories act in the same way. They cause a dampening of any excitability or any damage that has occurred to cells and neurons, and stops that damage from escalating and becoming more of a problem. So these kinds of foods are what we need to be focusing on, because when we're eating lots of these foods, we're making sure that the connection works well, we're making sure that the energy production process isn't causing any damage, any ongoing domino damage, and we're also making sure we're getting the nutrients, because these antioxidants are not just there as electron donors. They also form the foundation of making neurotransmitters with other micronutrients. So they have another job to play, but they're fantastic little helpers to make sure that the brain stays healthy.
Talking about free radicals, I have this visual of these angry little people walking around, and it's got me thinking about us as humans and how stressed, particularly over the last couple of years, there's lots of stress and anxiety. I haven't seen the research, but I'm sure you have. I feel like the instances of mental health are increasing. Everybody talks about burnout. Actually, we had Vanessa McCamley on, and we talked a little bit about how unfortunate it is that we now live in a time where burnout is just a thing that we just expect happens to people. And there's one thing that you say that I want to create space for to explore, which is why we could explore moving from referring to it as stress management to stress resilience, what the difference is and why it's important and how it can help us.
This is a great question, Fallon, and it's an important distinction for listeners to really take home and grasp. You manage something when it doesn't happen all the time. So you manage it, and then it goes away and it comes back again, and then you manage it. We don't live in that kind of world anymore. We live in a world where we need to actually be stress resilient to be able to cope with stress all the time. And I think the world was getting more complex before COVID, but COVID added a layer of complexity and uncertainty and overwhelm to everybody living on this planet. And that escalated this stress response that we were having maybe intermittently and made sure that it became part of our everyday life. And I don't see the stress disappearing at any point in time. So speaking about managing something is kind of like really old-fashioned in the way the world now operates. We really need to step up and become stress resilient so that whatever comes towards us, we can cope with that. And one of the main ways to do that is to make sure that we eat really well. The challenge is that, and one of the reasons that people have really experienced so much more mental health challenges, and you're right, that the research is showing that it's been an exponential rise. And it wasn't surprising to any of us that understand how the brain works, because chronic stress, this is stress that goes on for long periods of time, actually changes the structure of the brain. And the brain becomes incapable of modulating emotions optimally. So let's just think about that from a practical perspective. You know, when you're not chronically stressed and something irritates you or something frustrates you, you deal with it and you go back to baseline, normal mood, coping, capable, you know, not overwhelmed, really proactive, thinking clearly, sleeping well, and so on. However, when chronic stress steps in, the changes that take place within the limbic system, and so this is like the emotional headquarters in the brain, though the cortisol that keeps on bathing those neurons actually changes their structure, and the brain becomes heightened to anything that seems out of place and that seems like it could be a threat, which means that the neurons need to change shape. They're now becoming more aligned to becoming vigilant, careful, on the lookout, and tending to be overwhelmed all the time. What does that mean? That means that our mood also shifts. That means that it's very hard for us to come back to baseline and be calm and relaxed and just at peace. We're now at a stage where we're just a little bit vigilant, just a little bit on the lookout. So anything that comes across our path can easily lead to frustration, irritation, and just being plain cranky, as us Australians say. Now, that's a challenge, because the more stress that comes our way, the more vigilant we become. And so the brain basically becomes this high alert pattern detection machine. Instead of being able to go back to baseline, it stays at that high alert stage. That's the problem that we have on our hands. And when that happens, a lot of people gravitate to the kinds of foods that make them feel better quickly, because they release endogenous opioids in the body. So these are highly refined foods, very sweet foods, maybe salty, oily foods, processed foods. We feel well and good for a couple of minutes. Our blood glucose goes up, so we feel fine, but then it crashes down again, and we want that kind of food again. So there's a very complex and damaging negative spiral that can come from this perception that the world is now a dangerous place, which affects our physiology, our sympathetic nervous system, our parasympathetic nervous system, leads to us eating nutrient deficient foods, and the spiral continues downwards. And that's why I now speak about stress resilience. We have to be proactive in making sure that our brain and our body, our whole neurophysiology, is functioning optimally, because the world isn't going to change. It's only going to become more complex. So we actually have to step up to meet it on that level. And of course, this involves a discussion about sleep and exercise, which, you know, we can have at a later stage. But basically, the foundation has to be nutrition, because what a lot of people don't realize is that adrenaline and cortisol doesn't just get produced from nothing. Adrenaline and cortisol are produced from nutrients. And because those stress hormones are primed for our survival, the production of them will take precedence over the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and even cellular energy, which is why a lot of people felt exhausted and burnt out, and still do over this period of time, because the nutrients that they have available are being used to synthesize adrenaline and cortisol. And guess what? You can't make serotonin optimally then, and you can't make melatonin, because serotonin is the precursor to melatonin, because many of the same nutrients are required for all of those functions. And the body will always focus on survival, get away from that tiger, primary goal. So nutrients have to be the foundation. They're the first principle we start at to start feeling better. And then we build on that with different practices and strategies.
That's amazing. And I can really see this vicious cycle playing out for so many of us. Not the right fuel, getting stressed, not being able to sleep, not being able to produce the right hormones. And so it goes. The first question that I have for people who are relating to this cycle right now is will we ever get back? Is it possible to reverse that? After things have changed, can you reverse it? Or are we talking proactive here?
Look, this is a good question, but it's a bit of a sobering one to answer, Fallon, because the truth of the matter is that this is not just happening in isolation. The cortisol that's been bathing our brains has also been bathing all of our cells. And we've created new neural pathways now. And also we've been aging through this process, and aging comes with its own, unfortunately, negative effects. So it's like a moving disaster moving forwards. So a lot of people have felt the need to make drastic action. So they've resigned from their jobs, they've maybe left relationships, they've sold up their houses, they're moving to the forest, different things that people have decided to make big shifts with, because they don't want to carry on living like this going forwards. And obviously everybody needs to make the decision based on their circumstances. But the tragic part of this process is that once the brain has made a neural pathway, it never disappears. We don't override new or old neural pathways. We actually have to create new ones. So the longer that people stay stressed and the longer they have these new ways of behaving and these new ways of thinking, the harder it is to create a new neural pathway that basically cancels that one out, in effect, but needs to be practiced a lot so that it becomes the default option. So I say to people, let's be really hopeful and let's work on strategies to help you think more clearly. And we start with the food, and then we look at behavioral and mindset strategies. But keep in mind that if something happens in the external world to rock us again and to disturb our equilibrium, the chances are that we will, like a knee-jerk reaction, fall back on that, oh my goodness, I'm so overwhelmed. What's going to happen? This is so stressful feeling, because it's there now. It's never going to go away. We can't take a pill to make it go away. We can't think a new thought to make it go away. It's always going to be there. We have to have a new way of thinking and being now. And that's why I speak about stress resilience. We need to actually step up in a different way to be able to address this challenge, because it's now become part of us. It's part of our neurobiology. It's part of the architecture of our brain now.
That is such fantastic information to have, and a good call to action, I think, for all of us. It's got me thinking, when you talk about resilience and exposing yourself, to me, resilience a little bit comes from experience. So you need to experience it. And they say that with age comes experience. So what about our young people? It is June, it's the end of June 2022 right now. And in the United States, we've just gone through graduation season. And so post-prom, post-summer, we are packing up our best and brightest and sending a lot of them off to college, hopefully to expand their minds, grow their brains and educate them. But also, and people joke about it all the time, but it's massive amounts of alcohol and surviving on ramen. As parents, and as I hear this, and as somebody who is currently responsible for the nutrition of 2 little boys, how do you view that rite of passage, and what are we doing wrong, or how can we prepare our people for success as they go off into the world on their own?
Fallon, you're asking me lots of sobering questions. This is a good one, and I've got 3 main points to make here. And I think once people are aware of this, maybe they'll look at the situation differently. So the first one to keep in mind is that these students are going out into the world and their brains are not fully formed yet. Let's be really clear about this. The prefrontal cortex, which is the most sophisticated part of the brain and the CEO of the brain, is only fully formed in males at about the age of 27 and in females at about the age of 23, 24. So this is the part of the brain that allows us to inhibit behavior that we think could be damaging and cause chaos. It's the part of the brain that allows us to be creative. It's the part of the brain that allows us to absorb information and see how it affects us and what the consequences of that information will be. So it's a very sophisticated part of the brain, not fully developed, and the most energy demanding part of the brain. Okay. Now, living on alcohol and ramen isn't supplying this part of the brain with the nutrients that it needs, never mind the rest of the brain and the rest of the body. So that's the first point. A developing brain is not getting the nutrients it needs to optimize its development, its functioning, and its intellectual potential. Sobering thought, isn't it? Second really important point. These children are going off into the wide world and they're going to be making decisions that are life-changing. And those decisions revolve around relationships, alcohol consumption, risky behavior, such as drug taking, All of those life-changing decisions are now being made using a brain that isn't being optimally nourished and is also being exposed to new areas of stress and anxiety, such as a new peer group, new learning, a stricter timetable, being on their own without parents to do washing and cooking and all of that. So that's a brain that's now not functioning as well as it should be functioning because of all of these things going on and because of the stress component, which also limits prefrontal cortex capacity. So that's a challenge. And that brain being stressed is going to be affecting the emotions of that person. Okay. And when you're really emotional, you don't make really good decisions. So those life-changing decisions can be impacted by the way this whole brain is responding to the environment and not having the nutrients it needs. And the third point, which is pretty self-evident, these kids are going out there to get an education. They're going to be exposed to new information, new knowledge, new ways of thinking. The brain really needs to be optimally nourished to be able to take advantage of all of these wonderful opportunities to increase its capacity, to make new connections between neurons, to allow the brain to think new thoughts, to be creative, to be innovative. This is the future. These children are our future. They are the future leaders on this planet. And they're not ensuring that their brains are functioning optimally to make maximum benefit of all of these inputs that they're going to be receiving. So those are just three elements of this problem of alcohol and ramen consumption, that this very sensitive, very sophisticated, very complex brain is not being optimized because of those decisions.
Ron, we met Ron yesterday. So Ron Shaw, who works as a part of B-Dance, and Tim Turner, who also we work with, they were both the people who took care of the dorm rooms in university campuses. And they have told stories of how students would show up. They don't know how to make a meal. They don't know how to buy food for themselves. They don't know how to use the laundry. They don't know how to do any of those things. And so as a parent, I'm looking at this and thinking, and with the information that you're sharing, it really is our responsibility to get in early and not just telling our kids, eat it because it's good for you, but eat it because it tastes great. Eat it because it's going to have a great impact on your life, and giving them the information that they need to make those better choices, because the choice is going to be their own sooner than we think.
Absolutely. I think there's a great business opportunity here for a company to actually step in and say, guess what? We're going to supply you with 6 weeks of information about the kind of food you should be eating, how to boil an egg, how to, shop for food, how to do your washing, because that will take a huge stress off these children as they head out into the world. Because as I said, when the brain is poorly nourished, all of these new decisions and all of these new things that they have to do, it's going to lead to an extra layer of stress. And as parents, I think if we understand this, we'd actually step up and make sure that our children are prepared. And it's not about starting to feed them well when they're going off to college. It's about starting to feed them well when they're really young, so that they gravitate to that food. Because our taste buds basically acclimatize to the food that we eat during the first 7 years of our lives. And after that, it becomes really hard to change people's taste buds. They have to make a very conscious effort to do that, same as learning a language. So starting out really young, by letting them eat the kinds of food that support optimal intellectual potential, then they'll make the job a lot easier for themselves and for those young people stepping out into the world.
Talking about changing bodies and changing relationships, it's got me asking the question, what about hormones, and what role does that play in all of this?
Good question and interesting answer. Hormones are also produced from the food that we eat. So if we are deficient in specific nutrients, and I think specifically of magnesium and zinc and iron, for example, if we're deficient in those nutrients, those hormones aren't synthesized optimally. We don't have enough of them. And it's one of the reasons why teenagers and young people often get skin problems, because so much of the nutrients that the body is using are going to produce hormones, which are part of the survival and breed programming in the brain, that now they don't have enough of those nutrients to keep the skin healthy and the digestive tract healthy and the brain healthy. So that's just a small example. The challenge is, of course, that ultimately, the body will prioritize making hormones because it's part of, as I said, the body's protocol. So what happens is that specifically for women, estrogen and progesterone synthesis in our reproductive years is linked to serotonin and GABA neurotransmitters. So when estrogen peaks, so does serotonin. But when estrogen dips, so does serotonin. And the same for progesterone and GABA. They've got this relationship that works in tandem. So when women suffer from severe PMT, for example, it's because the serotonin and the GABA are being impacted directly because of the hormone fluctuation. So if young people are experiencing that, and any woman, then they need to go and check that out and make sure that their hormones come back into balance again. However, extreme stress will impact that, and so will nutrient deficiencies. Hormones won't be able to be synthesized optimally. So once again, we're back to nutrients and we're back to mindset in relation to stress and stress resilience. It's a little bit different for men because their testosterone level stays high throughout their life and then dips slowly in the last 20 years of their life. But for women, it fluctuates regularly throughout the month in our reproductive years. But then we basically fall off a cliff when we get to menopause. And that's when a lot of women can start battling with mental health challenges, including depression and anxiety, because serotonin and GABA are now impacted because there's not a lot of estrogen and progesterone to keep that balance going. So it's an important question, and hormones and brain health have a lot of interaction, Fallon.
You mentioned something that they want to create a little bit of space for, and you said notice changes or behavioral things. Something that I've learned from you, but I'd want to create space for, is if you're waiting to see the symptoms, there's a message here, because the brain is very clever. And I'm thinking about things like dementia, Alzheimer's. What can you tell us about the brain and how it treats those things? Because you say people are looking for a cure, but what do you have to say about that?
Helen, can I get to that in a moment? I just want to mention something about the previous part of the conversation. The research shows very clearly that students on campuses globally, but specifically the research related to America, do suffer from a lot of mental health challenges when they are at university. And we know that at the moment, this generation is battling significantly with anxiety and depression. So this is something that is a very important conversation. And this is obviously speaking to that aspect of this conversation, because the earlier and the more often you have a depressive or anxiety episode, the greater the chances are that you'll have another one. So many of these children are being set up for a lifetime of mental health challenges. So I just wanted to mention that. But now on to another sobering conversation. Dementia, of which Alzheimer's is the most prevalent form of dementia, is a huge challenge, because specifically in Alzheimer's research, we know that the brain is capable of doing these wonderful workarounds for around 20 years before it becomes really noticeable to other people that the brain has degraded to a significant effect. So let's think about this. It's because of the sophistication of the brain. So a neuron starts functioning really poorly. And so what happens is another neuron will pick up that slack, and it will then create a connection with another neuron. And so that neuron can quietly die without really being noticeable to us, because the function that it was performing is now being performed by another neuron. And this can happen for 20 years under the cover without us being aware of it. And then suddenly someone will say, oh, my father has got dementia. No, what's actually been happening is for 20 years, the brain has been battling to cope in an environment that is not conducive to health and well-being. And so it's made all these connections, but now it can't keep it up anymore, because eventually the brain will run out of capacity to do that. So we need to speak about prevention from a very young age versus trying to cure this problem when it really rears its head, because there isn't a tablet, and billions of dollars have been spent on Alzheimer's research looking for that one tablet to give the person so that their brain can suddenly regenerate. It's not going to happen, because it's not just related to food, it's also related to cognitive stimulation, it's related to exercise and movement, because that keeps the brain healthy, and it's related to sleep. So all of these factors, when you combine them, If a person isn't paying attention to them across their lifespan, they have a significantly greater chance of getting Alzheimer's because of all these different factors that come together in a terrible, perfect storm to prepare that brain for ineffective functioning, if I can put it that way.
Fantastic. And I've really enjoyed our conversation today. If we think about the food for thought that you've given us, it's really start now. If people have been inspired, if they're motivated, that one thing that they could walk away today with, our listeners, if they're inspired to really get serious, it's start with those building blocks. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Get serious about your nutrition.
Absolutely, Fallon. And I think one of the things, and I know we spoke about this before this actual recording, is to set ourselves up for success. Because once again, going back to this really complex, stressed world that we live in, if we don't set ourselves up for success in our homes, in our pantries, in our fridges, in our freezers, what's on our shelves, we are not going to make it easy for ourselves. Because what do we do when we're stressed and we're time poor and we're overwhelmed? We just grab the closest thing, which is why a lot of people gravitate to processed food. So we need to set up our kitchen, learn how to make healthy, delicious food quickly, and then we'll have it all around us. We won't have to make a conscious decision every time to not eat the rubbish and eat the good stuff. We'll be surrounded by the good stuff. It will be easy to make the right decision.
I love that. And one tip that I like as well for consciously preparing the right ingredients, and it's a little trick we have in our family, which is when you go to the grocery store, try and stick outside the aisles.
Yes.
You know, do the perimeter first. Go in for your hair care and that kind of thing. But I feel like going up and down those aisles, especially if I take my kids, it's a recipe for a lot of processed, unbrain-friendly foods.
Absolutely. And another tip is never go to the grocery store hungry. Because if you go hungry, your brain is on alert to look for something to get its blood glucose up quickly. And then you can't bring conscious thought into that. Because just remember that emotion travels a lot faster in the brain than thought. So sometimes our emotion will override our thought. Often it does, because the focus is to get away from that tiger or to get the food if we're really hungry. It's not focused on clear thinking.
Delia, Dr. Delia McCabe, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for affording us this opportunity and sharing your beautiful brain with us today. For those of you who are listening, make sure that you take the opportunity to go and hear more from Dr. McCabe. She has a fantastic book, Feed Your Brain. You can head over to her website, which is lighterbrighteryou.life. And she's also got some great resources over there. One is the 7-point checklist to feel light and bright. Delia, can you tell us a little bit about what listeners can look forward to in that free gift from you?
It's actually a checklist that I made for myself, because when COVID started, my plans went awry as well. And I thought, Delia, you need to get yourself back on track. You need to make sure that you're doing what you know. And I made this checklist for myself, and people started saying to me, what are you doing to stay okay? And I said, look, this is my checklist. And I just turned it into a gift. So when people look at this gift, they'll see that I put my psychology hat on some of the time. I put my neuroscience hat on some of the time. And then I put the checklist for food in there as well. So they'll get a checklist of what they should be eating every single day, and also some information about some nutrients, because there is some evidence to support the fact that some nutrients can be helpful when we're feeling very stressed. So I'm sure that people will find it really helpful just to have a checklist, go through it every day. I do everything on that list every day myself, because I know that supports my robust brain to stay robust.
That's fantastic. It's a great call to action, and it's lovely to have something tangible that can really help us all. Thank you again, and thank you for everything that you continue to do. We're so glad that you did step off that path and you've chased down this information for us and are bringing it to us today. I'm looking forward to the next time that we get to catch up. I wish you a beautiful rest of the day, and thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Fallon. I really appreciate the opportunity. And to everyone behind the scenes, your team, thank you to them as well for making this possible.
Thank you, and see you next time on Break It to Make It. New episodes here every single week. Don't forget, if you would like to feature on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you, and refer your friends. See you next time.